Hey everybody, welcome back to Dietitians and Nutrition Support. Today we have a very fun and kind of different for us video that is focused on what I wish I knew when I was a new dietitian. So my name is Lauren. I'm about 7 years out of my MSDI program, after which I did a PhD in nutrition and have since been working in the nutrition research space. And there are so many things that I wish someone would have told me earlier on in my career that I could have used. So if you are a new dietitian or an RD to be, this is definitely the one for you to get some tips and tricks of how to kind of approach those early years in your dietetics career. And I have two awesome guests who are joining me today, Jessica and Kaitlyn, and they're going to introduce themselves and share a little bit more about their background and expertise before we dive in.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica. Thank you so much for having me, Lauren. I have been a registered dietitian for 4 years. I actually started in a dietetic technician program, which is where I met Kaitlyn. We did a coordinated MSDI program, and then I have worked in an acute care hospital for the last 4 years. I am a CNSC as well, a certified nutrition support clinician. I cover primarily critical care, oncology, and I'm also a lead dietitian at my current hospital. So I do focus on a lot of training and mentoring, and I am an adjunct professor as well.
Hi everyone. My name is Kaitlyn. So obviously Jessica basically did an intro for both of us. So we met at our diet tech program where we then transferred to our DPD and then our DIMS program all at the same time. I worked at a separate acute care hospital from Jessica for my first about year and a half of being a dietitian, where I covered half med surg, half long-term vent unit. And then I transferred to Jessica's hospital where we currently work together. And I cover one of our critical care units and a general med surg floor, as well as our nutrition support. So I'm also a CNSC. And then I also am an adjunct professor at a separate university in New York.
Thank you guys. I think it's so fun hearing about people's different, journey in dietetics, just because we all kind of come about it in a different way and all have different pathways, sometimes to the same job and sometimes to different jobs. But what I think is really cool about dietetics and all the kind of subspecialties that we have is there are a lot of similar opportunities with leadership or educator roles and probably similar challenges. For me, at least, especially early on, I think of things like imposter syndrome. And so I wanted to ask you guys, what do you feel like new RDs could do to kind of grow in their confidence and in their skill sets as they start out in their career in dietetics?
So imposter syndrome is very real personally for me. My first year of being a dietitian was definitely a struggle, imposter syndrome wise, but every time I felt I had imposter syndrome, I had all of my other dietitians also always supporting me. They're also experiencing imposter syndrome here and there, and they love new dietitians because they love hearing the new research and all that stuff that you're also learning in school that maybe they are not getting as much education. You just have to really remember you are the nutrition expert. So, being the dietitian and teaching not only your patients, but the other healthcare providers that you are with.
As a new dietitian, to your point, Kaitlyn, of you're coming in teaching some of the older dietitians new information that they may not be aware of, because nutrition in the medical field is always ever changing. But I think when you look at, you have a lot to learn as a new dietitian, but you also have a lot to teach others, and you have that like symbiotic relationship of, they're teaching you, but you're also teaching them, and you look at, you're always going to be learning no matter what. It really does kind of help quiet some of that imposter syndrome, to know it's okay that you're not going to know everything all the time.
It's funny that you say, the dietitian is the nutrition expert, only because I swear everyone else thinks they're the like nutrition expert and they're the dietitian. And it's been, an interesting experience for me in the nutrition space, facing pseudoscience and people who are kind of spreading, misinformation in like social media and on other platforms. What's your guys' kind of take on, how to make sure that we're spreading evidence-based information?
Especially with social media right now, it is a crazy world to currently be in when it comes to nutrition. Whether, it is the pseudoscience itself, because you can post anything you want on social media. There's going to be some sort of false information and someone's going to believe it. So social media does definitely provide a challenge, but I think you just need to be very confident in your education and the evidence-based research that we learn. And I know Jessica herself is always the first one to pull out a research article whenever it's needed for someone. So I think you definitely just need to stand strong on your grounds.
Knowing where to get the information to show what we are taught and what we know as dietitians is evidence-based is really important. Using those peer-reviewed articles and keeping up to date on the research as well. And not being afraid to, whether it's on social media, maybe you want to link that post, or if it's in a conversation with a nurse or a doctor who may be spreading false information to a patient, or even to other staff members. It's okay to step in as the nutrition expert and come with your research article to say, hey, this is what I know to be true. This is what the research points to, and this is something that we should all, agree upon is the right course of action.
Yeah, I totally agree. And especially being that I'm a nutrition research person myself, I'm always like, yes, please, let's look to the literature, right? And so I think having that strong background of how to find information and sharing how to find information with, patients or clients, helping to empower them with the skills of finding the right answer can be super beneficial for them for the long term. But I think another part of that is knowing that we also don't know everything right off the top of our head, right? Like we all need to take a moment and sometimes do a search for more literature or find some more information.
I think it's really also important to find a mentor, whether it is an old professor, a colleague, and then also become a mentor for other dietitians. There are other dietitians that I look up to. They're strong, they advocate for their patient, they're always on the research. They're always someone that I'm going to help me grow. So it's also important that once you also get that, you can also be that for someone else.
I think mentorship is super important, but I think it's also important to know that we do have a scope of practice. Some things that we may get asked by patients or clients may not be in our scope of practice. So knowing our scope of practice and being empowered to say, I don't know, but I can give you the best information, or I can point you to which provider or which specialty is the best source of information. And I think that kind of goes back and forth as you build those relationships with other healthcare professionals and your clients, that you are going to be able to point them in the right direction, and other people are going to be able to point people to you as the nutrition expert.
How do we combat misinformation, or how do we share the right stuff? It all comes back to the fact that even if you're not a student anymore, you're absolutely still learning, and you should really have that mindset that, you're going to continue learning, whether it's just on the job or you're reading or you're taking things like continuing education classes. Those are such a great opportunity, I feel like, to just kind of pick out areas where you want more expertise, or maybe pick out areas that you don't know anything about it.
So I think the continuing education process is wonderful. There's a lot of journals that, give it for free. They're always doing education. So you can find education in whatever you're looking for. I love going to just random fun. We don't, really ever get to deal with in the hospital, but we have interests outside of what our area of expertise is. I know the master's degree is now required for any new dietitians, but I think people shouldn't give up on, whether going back to school for more advanced degrees, whether it is a terminal degree like your doctorate, or going for the certifications.
I think another good point is, although we come out of school with a lot of knowledge, sometimes there is a gap between real life practice and what you learn in school. I think it's important to remember that there's not always a right or clear cut answer in nutrition, especially in clinical dietetics and the hospital setting. When you're in school, you get a case study on, let's say congestive heart failure, and that's your focus. But in the hospital, your patient's going to have congestive heart failure, diabetes, malnutrition, and renal failure. So you really have to get good at deciding what's the most important nutrition problem to tackle. And that comes easier with time, but whether it is the continuing education lectures, reading those research articles, shadowing dietitians that are in the specialty to learn more about it, there are so many ways that you can learn new information and really try to bridge that gap.
I once had a professor tell me, being a student is the biggest plus because you can always say like, oh, I'm a student, I'm just here to learn. And it really is like an all access pass to people who want to help you. There are so many nice people who want you to succeed. And so whether that's taking informational interviews or if you can actually get, on the hospital floor and be doing some shadowing, that's such a great way to really understand what it is you're signing up for and to also get some tips of, hey, these are some things that, I might try to put on my resume so that I can be prepared to apply for this job in the future. And with the thought of jobs in mind, I'm wondering if you guys wanted to talk a little bit about how do you even apply for that first job? Because I feel like coming out of school, being in school for so long, it feels kind of scary.
So I think it is definitely really scary applying for your first job. And one of my biggest advice is start early and don't be afraid to apply for jobs that you may not exactly qualify for. There are a lot of non-traditional dietitian job. You may not start there in your career, but it's something that you can work towards. Not being afraid to apply for jobs and putting yourself out there is really important. I think it's always good to have somebody look over your resume, especially when you're just starting out from the internship. You really want to try and highlight things that you did in your internship that are beyond the traditional internship process. I think it's awesome to even bring in samples of different projects that you did. A lot of times when we are applying for jobs, personality is really important. They want to make sure that, yes, you can bring the clinical skills and knowledge, but that you're a good personality fit, that you're going to mesh well with the team.
Part of what feels scary about interviewing and going for jobs is that you feel like they're only interviewing you, but that's not true. You're interviewing them also. I have been to a job interview before where they offered me the job and I said no because it was a situation where I was so, like, I met the whole team and I was so uncomfortable all day. And so sometimes you do have those situations where it's just not the right fit. And it might be because the team isn't a right fit. It might be because the job isn't a right fit, or it might really be things like they actually just don't pay enough. The Academy of Nutrition Dietetics does have resources that kind of gives you the average pay for what for your area and like kind of what specialty you're looking for.
Don't settle and don't give up. Just in general in the interview process. And just because you get a job offer does not mean you have to accept it if it's not right for you, as you were just mentioning. Find what you feel is right for you. Don't just take whatever first job you are offered. And with that, you do get jobs, sometimes out of your internship. So I think it's always a good idea to make a good impression at all your sites, whether or not you personally want to work in that space. Dietitian world can sometimes be very small. So, even if I wanted to work in renal, but I did food service, sometimes somehow they know each other. And, you just always want to make a good impression on everyone. Keeping up with job postings can be very helpful to either identify new jobs that you want to find or just like different skill sets and trainings that you may be interested in pursuing. For a nutrition support job, you can find that they require the CNSC. Okay, great. Now I'm going to work towards my CNSC. Sometimes you need to be creative when searching for jobs. They don't always use dietitian in their listings. So sometimes you'll find nutritionist, medical science liaison, which jobs that dietitians can do that you're not seeing because you're just typing in dietitian.
You can sometimes actually find opportunities for jobs or positions even just from talking to people, because that networking piece is so key. And I think it's funny to tell the origin story about how we know each other because we actually all met each other at Fancy this last year. And so it is purely by a stroke of luck that we even all are on this video together. So I think that that's like just one of the things to show like how powerful networking can be.
And I think that's really the beauty of joining various organizations like dietetic practice groups, and taking advantage of the resources. Because I know Kaitlyn and I are so grateful that we met you, Lauren, because we're really opened up to all the different resources of DNS that we had no idea were out there before. You never know who you're going to meet and where it's going to lead you.
Totally agree. I think there's so much power in volunteering and getting going in an organization. And they always say, you get out of it what you put into it. And so really taking the time to, invest some hours of your week into a group, getting to know those people, you can not only see, like sometimes personal projects, like this YouTube channel is a personal project of mine that is now, a channel people watch, which is amazing. So thanks for watching. But it can show you these opportunities to meet people, grow projects, and really get yourself integrated into the community. But it's not even just on the scale of like different groups too. I mean, there's so much to do with kind of integrating yourself in the team that you might work with in the future.
Something I am really passionate about, especially with interns and new dietitians, is helping them integrate into the interdisciplinary team. We have so much to learn from, our other healthcare providers. The reality is like we don't work in silos as dietitians. The cool thing about that is sometimes your other team members may not be familiar with what you do as a dietitian. We have a responsibility to teach others about what we do. That doesn't just go for our patients, it also goes for our fellow colleagues. It's a really cool feeling when your team knows you and trusts you, and you get to come to rounds and help spread new information with various articles and asking good questions. So I think that's a really cool feeling when you have those physician and nurse champions that really want to learn from you and help spread nutrition information.
One of my regrets as a new dietitian was I did not integrate myself into that interdisciplinary rounds as I do now, which I think definitely hindered, but has taught me to grow. The second I stepped on to my new unit at my new hospital and I was like, I'm Kaitlyn, I'm the dietitian. This is like kind of what we're gonna do. They were like, okay, let's go. Like they knew who I was. They were ready to call me when they need me, sometimes even when I'm not in the hospital, but that's okay. And I think it's really important to just have that confidence. Know you are the nutrition expert and your expertise is needed in those interdisciplinary rounds.
Something else that I was considering is as you kind of get settled into your space in your team. I think a lot of folks will find sort of like niches of things that they have most interest in.
That's the beauty of being a new dietitian is you can really start exploring where do you see yourself kind of specializing. And some people may choose to stay broad, but I also think it's okay that if you know you love a certain area of dietetics, it's okay to try and pursue that specialty early on in your career. I think people are afraid sometimes. They may not be sure where they're going to go, but the reality is just because you start somewhere, it doesn't mean you can't end up somewhere else. And if you know you have an interest in one, start studying and connecting with those who already have that advanced certification. There's tons of different study groups for various certifications, webinars, conference sessions on those related topics. Utilizing the right resources and mentors can really help you to get to be where you want to be early on in your career. And kind of what comes to mind for me in that space is management, private practice, and research. I think those are three big things that people tend to see themselves wanting later on in their career, and they tend to shy away from early on.
Obviously, Jessica and I work in the hospital setting, in a critical care setting, yet, but we're able to run our own studies. We have those doctors that are nutrition champions, and whenever we want to say we want to do this, we want to study this, we're gonna XYZ, they are always the first one to be like, yes, go ahead, we're so excited for you, let us know how we can help you. Just because we're dietitians for 3.5 years, we have been doing research for about 2. So we were basically brand new dietitians when we decided to start doing some of our own research and doing the abstracts and publications. You can do things simultaneously. So you can work in a hospital and you can still do outpatient private practice. You can do sports nutrition on the side if that's your interest. Just don't limit yourself because one way or another you can get it.
I think that there's, just again, so many opportunities as a new RD to really hone your own, kind of space and figure out what your path is, and also know that it's a winding path and it's fine if you kind of take a few detours along the way. So much opportunity out there for dietitians. So if you feel like you are kind of fitting into this group of new dietitians or RDs to be, we would love to hear your questions in the comments. So please feel free to drop them down there. Thank you, Jessica and Kaitlyn, so much for your time. It's always fun to chat with you guys. And we look forward to seeing you all in the next one.